A Russian submarine surfaces, encircling the American USS aircraft carrier in the open sea. Radar blares. Could this be the beginning of a naval storm? It all began with steel-cold warning tones echoing across the radio frequencies. Two Russian Su-24S swept dangerously close to the bow, while a destroyer cut through the waves, charging straight toward the USS Thomas Hudner at 28.4 knots, like a predator locked on its prey. Above, four Su-30SMs armed with Mach 3 anti-ship missiles roared into the sky, tearing through the frozen haze. And then, a single question gripped every sailor's mind. What happens when Russia points its guns at a $13, $3 billion American warship in the middle of an icy ocean? But the deadliest undercurrent lurked beneath the surface. A Kilo-class submarine rumbled forward, broadcasting a 12 dB sonar ping against the backdrop, a deliberate signal of challenge. At the same time, Russian radar locked firmly onto the USS Gerald R. Ford, the most expensive and formidable warship in history. In the next 60 minutes, 48 American fighter jets would be launched one after another, turning this frozen expanse into a proving ground of absolute power. And then, America struck back without a single explosion. EA-18G Growlers instantly blinded Russia's radar systems, while a Virginia-class submarine surfaced just 6.2 nautical miles from the Russian fleet, shattering their entire anti-submarine net. It was a display of invisible dominance, forcing Russian forces to retreat in silence. Afterward, Moscow could do nothing more than lie to its own navy. That morning, the Barents Sea seemed calm, yet a blade lay hidden beneath its surface. At 07:14, the USS Thomas Hudner cut through 14-foot waves under a bleak Arctic sky. It was part of a freedom of navigation patrol alongside the USS Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group. But just 2 minutes later, the SPY-6 radar picked up an abnormal acceleration from the Russian side, the opening move of the year's most tense confrontation. The moment the radar signal lit up, a secret order from Moscow was transmitted. Block the Americans, force them back, and prove Russia's dominance over the northern seas. But Russia had chosen the wrong target. Standing before them was not just a destroyer, but 148,000 tons of American sovereignty afloat. The USS Gerald R. Ford, flanked by 4 destroyers and 2 nuclear submarines, controlling every mile of ocean within a 300 nautical mile radius. The USS Gerald R. Ford is not just an aircraft carrier, it is a declaration forged in steel. On its deck rest over 75 combat aircraft, flanked by 4 guided missile destroyers and 2 nuclear submarines. Every inch of water around it is under relentless surveillance. The enemy may think they are in control, but in truth, they are only acting out a script America wrote long ago, with every outcome calculated to the second. Then Russia struck first. At 07:21, 4 Su-30SM fighters took off from Millennia Air Base, armed with KH-31P anti-radar missiles and KH-35U Mach 3 anti-ship missiles. In just 12 minutes, they would breach the 25 nautical mile defensive ring around the USS Gerald R. Ford, the most sensitive zone in NATO's Arctic defense doctrine. Yet this was only the visible tip of Russia's larger strategy. Next, the fire control radar of the Admiral Levchenko suddenly locked onto the Ford, sending a silent message. "We are ready to fire at your flagship." The air grew thick with tension. At the same moment, the sonar of the USS Thomas Hudner picked up a Kilo-class submarine 28,000 yards away, creeping through a thermal layer. It was far too noisy to hide, a brazen challenge waving its flag from the ocean floor. Now, Russia was moving on 3 fronts at once: in the air, on the surface, and beneath the sea. But this wasn't flawless coordination. It was chaos disguised as strategy. The Su-30SMs had already burned through most of their fuel while skimming just 200 feet above the American decks, their shock waves rattling antennas. Yet the U.S. commanders held firm to discipline. No counterstrike, only observation, waiting for the perfect moment. America does not act out of fear. It acts when strategy demands it. And Russia was racing toward a line that, once crossed, offered no return. At 07:34, a lightning order came down, launched the entire air wing. Instantly, the deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford erupted like a volcano of steel, preparing to unleash an unprecedented display of power in the Arctic seas. Four F/A-18E Super Hornets roared off the deck one by one, spaced exactly 47 seconds apart, armed with AIM-120D missiles, AIM-9Xs, and 2,000-pound smart bombs. They did not strike immediately. Instead, they showcased absolute combat readiness. Overhead, an E-2D Hawkeye swept the skies with its AN/APY-9 radar, tracking 2,000 targets simultaneously. Every fluctuation, every tremor in the electromagnetic spectrum was firmly under American control. Meanwhile, 2 EA-18G Growlers activated their ALQ-249 jamming pods, turning Russian radar screens into a storm of false echoes. Within 30 seconds, 4 American jets appeared as 12, then 20 Phantom targets. The Su-30SM pilots were left relying only on radio chatter and their own eyes. In contrast, the U.S. Super Hornets could lock onto 20 targets, strike 6 simultaneously, and share targeting data instantly across the fleet. The technological gap was brutally clear. Russia still relied on old mechanical radars, sweeping sluggishly like World War II searchlights. At 07:41, a Russian fighter drifted into firing range, and an AIM-120D was primed to launch. Yet America held its fire, and because the real strike was already unfolding beneath the waves, where a Virginia-class submarine was silently closing in and locking onto its target. But beneath the cold, dark waters, the balance had already tipped toward America. A Virginia-class submarine, silent for 8 days, lay just 5.8 nautical miles from the Russian destroyer. It had tracked the Kilo class from the very start, recording every sound, every move. If war broke out, the Kilo would be erased in 12 seconds, the Levchenko in 40. This was no longer deterrence. It was a blade pressed against the enemy's throat. The more cornered Russia became, the more reckless it acted. At 07:46, a fuel-starved Su-30SM suddenly dove straight at an American FFA-18E, executing a provocative thump. But this was not the skies of Syria. The U.S. pilot, a Top Gun graduate, reversed, pulled 6.5 G, and closed on the Su-30's tail in just 2.7 seconds, locking it perfectly. One trigger pull could end it, yet American fire discipline held firm. At the same moment, beneath the sea, the Kilo class made a fatal mistake, raising its snorkel to recharge batteries. Within seconds, the sonar of the USS Thomas Hudner pinned its location with 14-meter precision. Classified as Project 877, sitting at 118 feet deep and moving at 3 knots, it had no idea it had been tailed for over an hour. In a combat scenario, a Vlasrock would turn it into a steel corpse in just 14 seconds. But the boldest move came from the surface. At 07:49, the Levchenko ceased its radar sweep and locked directly onto the USS Gerald R. Ford with a fire control beam, the equivalent of pressing a gun to its head. Ford's command center immediately initiated alert protocols, yet the order was clear: do not fire unless fired upon. Instead, the entire strike group silently finalized its kill solutions. This was the most dangerous gamble in modern naval history, and America won by forcing its adversary to back down. At 14:32, the skies over the North Atlantic erupted with power. In under 4 minutes, the Ford launched 48 fighter jets, the largest Arctic deployment since the Cold War. The air grew thick with the stench of fuel, as engines thundered like rolling storms across the sea. The first strike was a full-scale electronic assault. EA-18G Growlers activated their mid-band pod jammers, turning Russian radar, from the Levchenko all the way to the Kola Peninsula, into a sea of chaotic signals. Real targets vanished, false ones blinked in and out, and fire control locks were rendered useless. Russian pilots were left utterly blind, unable to tell phantoms from the deadly threats stalking them. In the skies above, American Super Hornets began showcasing their dogfighting mastery right in front of the Russian fighters. Barrel rolls, wing overs, 9G turns, maneuvers the Su-30 SMs couldn't match with fuel running low and radars scrambled. One by one, Russian pilots radioed fuel emergency and pulled away. By 15, Euro 6, 5 Russian aircraft turned back simultaneously, desperately trying to limp home. (03:47 a.m.) The order to strike back was confirmed. The flight deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford lit up as waves of F-35C fighters roared into the sky, tearing through the night with piercing screams. Each jet carried Stormbreaker smart bombs and AMRAAM missiles pre-programmed with pinpoint coordinates. Beneath the waves, a Virginia-class submarine opened its launch tubes. 12 Tomahawks surged upward, skimming low across the terrain like high-speed phantoms. Overhead, an E-2D Hawkeye orchestrated the entire operation, every second timed like a heartbeat, not a single miscalculation. And in that darkness, American technology began to illuminate the sky with destruction. Within just 42 minutes of the first wave of takeoffs, 45 key North Korean military targets were simultaneously wiped out. Tomahawks pierced through missile storage bunkers, while Stormbreakers slipped silently through treetops, striking hidden launch platforms with surgical precision. Each impact was a clean, devastating explosion, spaced like the rhythm of a heart that had suddenly stopped, casting fiery reflections onto the low-hanging clouds above. The U.S. military still adheres to the principle of defense. Wait for the enemy to fire first, then respond. But after that day's battle, that rule was torn up. From now on, any radar signal with a lock-on signal, any object flying into the restricted area, any electronic conflict from the shores of Yemen, will be considered an immediate threat. And when it is considered a threat, it is not warned, it is erased. The E-2D Hawkeye early warning aircraft fly continuously day and night. The radar is active. The defense system is always ready to fire. There is no more gray zone. There is no more probing. The U.S. is no longer on the defensive. It has switched to proactive deterrence by fire. The rules of the game have changed, and the message is engraved in the sky over the Red Sea: just show your head, and you will be burned. No exceptions. But the fatal blow surged up from the depths. At 14:41, the USS New Hampshire, a Virginia-class attack submarine, surfaced just 6.2 nautical miles from the Levchenko, white spray bursting as it broke the water. The Russians froze in shock, realizing it had shadowed them for over 9 days, slipping past every layer of their anti-submarine defenses. In a real war, the Levchenko would already be a wreck on the ocean floor. Amid raging seas and the frigid Arctic skies, silent warriors continue to safeguard freedom of navigation and the values of democracy. America does not seek war, but when provoked, it will end it swiftly and decisively. Subscribe now so you won't miss more stories of power like this.